First, I make discoveries that overlapped. I started to assemble the knowledge I had on this movement, and this allowed me to create a narrative constructed in 4 films. I visited the Peace Museum built by Kenzo Tange in Hiroshima a long time ago, and I still remember very moved by what I saw. When I later discovered Arata Isozaki's reruined Hiroshima, it immediately caught my attention. Isozaki has projected images of megastructure onto a photo mural of the razed city. Even so, Isozaki was not a metabolist in the strict sense of the term. He worked for Kenzo Tange, who was the instigator of this movement. I began to understand that metabolism was not only an architectural movement, but it touched other disciplines. In a word, that it was much more vast, a kind of philosophy of reconstruction. This is what pushed me to discover what the metabolist generated in terms of fruit, and I began to visit the architecture that was built in Tokyo. I also looked at the many projects they designed that were never built. It's from this I imagine invisible cities, as if all these projects were potentially inscribed in the city. They are the virtual cities embedded in the real city, a kind of urban ghost. After the Second World War, metabolism was a kind of forward-looking impulse towards the future development of urban space. A combination of very advanced technoscience and extremely masterful and ancestral craft. The combination of the two is quite astonishing, at least for the Westerner that I am. For 2 simple reasons. The first being that both projects were designed to be built in Tokyo. The second being that both projects are, to my taste, totally innovative, both conceptually and aesthetically. I did some location scouting in order to film the areas of Tokyo where the 3 models would later be built. The indications were quite clear for the Helix City. It was the Tokyo Bay. For Cluster in the Air, it was the Shibuya district. Conceptually and aesthetically, for Cluster in the Air, the proposal for a new type of housing to be built above the existing city is inspired by the traditional Japanese wooden architecture, in particular by the bracketing system used in projects such as the Great South Gate of Todaiji Temple in Nara. For Helix City, it was the DNA double helix, first photographed in 1953. Kisho Kurokawa was inspired by it for his project. The project of mixing historical strata with a contemporary Tokyo seemed to me to be an idea to be developed. To dream a city, to reveal a city by creating anachronism, such was the challenge of this project. A possible definition of anachronism, according to the art historian Daniel Arras, is the following: to take an object from the past of its time, to make it live today with the question of today. This is really with a view to questioning the present and bringing the invisible into being, an approach that is very close to a kind of art of the past. In the end, this approach is very close to a kind of urban archaeology in the sense that it reveals an invisible buried within a place and a time. In the case of invisible cities, I have always imagined that these projects were alive. The modus operandi is effectively an oxymoron, because in the end I don't oppose opposites, I link them, associate them, so that they coexist. I will start quoting Arata Isozaki when he talks about reruined Hiroshima and especially about the ruins. I quote, "They are dead architecture. Their total image has been lost. The remaining fragments require the working of the imagination to be restored." This was a trigger and a realization for me. In this project, I was doing urban archaeology a little bit without being fully aware. The other quote comes from Kishoki Rokawa and proved to be in total resonance with the construction of the film. I quote, "Time should not be conceived as a linear evolution, but it should be apprehended as autonomous fragments, as particles floating in space, or imagine time as a string of pairs, or as an helicoidal structure of DNA. Metabolist thinking is about integrating each period, past time, present time, and future time, into a single architectural space. There is no linear continuity of time. The images of time intermingle like rhythms. This is what I am talking about in Invisible Cities. The spatio-temporal crossing, the past resiliency in the present and even in the future. Elie During refers to retrofuturism when he talks about the Invisible City project. And I must also confess that I am a reader of Philip K. Dick. I work in a cave of continuity. The last images of station Onville de Biwako Machi are already the beginning of what is to come. After the Japanese project, I went to India, where I started to develop the biomimetics project. The discovery of an architect like Balakrishna Doshi was important in the sense that he brings vegetation inside his architecture. It's an integral part, not a decorative element. It runs through the architecture and inhabits it. We are witnessing a symbiosis that here is rarely successful. Biomimetism is a term that appeared in the 80s and was defined by Janine Banous as, I quote, "a science that studies nature with a view to imitating or drawing inspiration for it to solve human problems." In this case, what interests me is how the ever-growing globalized urban population will be able to live in densely populated urban areas in era of global warming. It is exciting because it is absolutely crucial issue. Could biomimetism be the beginning of an answer to future problems? I am not going to quote the architectural programs point by point because there are too many, and I think that it's desirable to see some proposal evolve. But a reference book that is certainly recommendable is Ecological Urbanism by Howard University.